Today on Sugar Spun Run, I'm showing you how to make the most decadent chocolate cheesecake ever. Hey Sugar Spun Bakers, Sam here, and today I am taking one of the most popular recipes on my blog, my classic cheesecake, and I am making it even better. I'm doing that by adding chocolate, of course. Now, to begin, you're going to want to go ahead and preheat your oven to 325 degrees Fahrenheit. Next, we're going to make our cookie crumb crust. Now, I feel like a good chocolate cheesecake needs a really good chocolate crust, and today I'm going to be using Oreos. We are going to be adding 25 Oreo cookies into the basin of a food processor. These are classic sandwich cookies. They are not double stuffed, and as you can see, I did not remove the cream filling before pulverizing them. Now, we're just going to pulse these until we have fine cookie crumbs. I want to make sure these are nicely crumbled. We have nice fine crumbs and no large cookie pieces left. The next ingredient you need is 4 tablespoons of melted butter, and you can use salted or unsalted butter, use whichever you happen to have in your fridge. I like to melt this in a medium-sized heat-proof bowl and then add my cookie crumbs into the bowl. Now you'll just want to stir together the cookie crumbs and the butter until they're completely combined. You want all of these crumbs to be coated with some of the butter. No, it looks like we missed a cookie here. Set that aside for later. So once everything's nicely combined and all the crumbs are moistened by the butter, you'll want to grab your pan. Now, for a cheesecake, you really need to use a springform pan, and today we are using a 9-inch pan. If you try to bake this recipe in a pie plate, it's going to end up overflowing, and you definitely do not want to use a pre-made store-bought pie crust either. Press these crumbs evenly into the bottom of your pan, and then about halfway up the side as well. A flat-bottomed measuring cup makes this job nice and easy. We went about halfway up in some spots and only about a third of the way up in others. That's completely fine. You just want to make sure the crust is going up the sides a little bit. You can set that crust aside. There is no need to pre-bake it. And now let's get to the chocolate. You are going to need 10 ounces of chocolate for today's recipe. I prefer to use chocolate bars, and as you can see, I'm using 60% because I like my chocolate to be a little bit darker, a little bit richer. I'm going to break this into a medium-sized heat-proof bowl. You want to break the pieces so they're about even in size, that way they melt evenly. Because once we have all this chocolate broken up, we're going to transfer it to the microwave and we are going to melt it. You could use a premium brand of semi-sweet or dark chocolate chips instead, but my preference is to use these baking bars. It's just a higher quality of chocolate. Anytime you're heating chocolate, you want to go low and slow. So we are going to heat this in 15 to 25 second intervals, stirring really well in between until the chocolate is nice and completely melted and smooth. You don't want to have any chocolate lumps left in your mixture, otherwise you're going to have lumps in your cheesecake. So make sure this is nice and silky smooth. If your chocolate turns grainy, it means you've made it too hot and it's seized and you're going to have to start over. Set that chocolate aside so it has some time to cool, and now let's move over to our mixer where we can start actually making that chocolate cheesecake batter. Now, of course, the first ingredient you're going to need is cream cheese. You need 4 8-ounce bricks of cream cheese, or 32 ounces. Whatever you do, do not use the spreadable kind that's sold in tubs. The cheesecake will not set up properly if you use that kind. Also, don't use low fat. We're going to add this into the bowl of our stand mixer. One of the things I love about my cheesecake recipes is they are not fussy in that they do not need a water bath. I hate baking with water baths. Now, in order to accomplish this, there are a few key tips so that your cheesecake turns out completely smooth, creamy, and crack-free every time. The most important thing is that you want all of your ingredients to be the same temperature, which means setting your eggs out so they reach room temperature and setting your cream cheese out so that also gets to room temperature before you begin. We're also going to be adding 1 1/3 cups of granulated sugar in with our cream cheese. Now cream this together until it's smooth, lump-free, and creamy. If your cream cheese is too cold at this point, you'll be left with little lumps that will show up in your cheesecake, and you don't want that. Make sure to pause periodically to scrape the sides and bottom of your bowl because it's so important that all of your ingredients are well combined. Cream cheese and sugar like to settle at the bottom of your bowl, which leaves you with lumps. Next, we'll add 2/3 cup of sour cream. If I can get it in there around the beater. Should stop that a little bit more strategically. And 1 1/2 teaspoons of pure vanilla extract. And stir until your batter is smooth and creamy. So once your batter is completely combined, now we can add our chocolate from earlier. It is important that the chocolate no longer be hot to the touch, but also that it hasn't begun to solidify. You want it to be nice and liquidy, and we will stir this into our batter. Now just stir in that chocolate until you have a nice, smooth, chocolate-colored batter. Next, you're going to need 4 large room temperature eggs. We are going to be adding these to the cheesecake one at a time, and you're going to want to lightly beat each egg with a fork before adding it into your batter. Turn your mixer to low speed and add the eggs one at a time, stirring just until each egg is incorporated into the batter. Anytime you are stirring cheesecake batter, you do not want to overdo it, otherwise you end up whipping air into your batter, which makes the cheesecake, it messes with the texture and makes it more likely to crack. This is especially important to remember when you're adding the eggs, because overbeating these eggs into your batter is really going to mess with the texture of your cheesecake and keep it from being nice and creamy and smooth. As always, you'll want to scrape the sides and bottom of the bowl, make sure that batter is completely incorporated. Give everything one more brief stir, and pour this into your prepared springform pan. The top will settle as it bakes, but I always like to smooth it with my spatula before taking it into the oven. Springform pans have a reputation for occasionally leaking, which can make a huge mess in your oven. I don't often have this problem, but just to make sure it doesn't happen to you, I recommend placing your prepared pan on a piece of foil on a baking sheet. This ensures that if your pan does leak, everything that leaks will be caught by the foil and by the pan. This will need to bake in our 325-degree Fahrenheit preheated oven for about 75 minutes. You'll know it's finished when the edges are slightly puffed and set, and if you jiggle it, the center doesn't look liquidy, but it will give a little bit, it will jiggle a little bit. The best thing you can do after baking your cheesecake is let it cool slowly. What I like to do is just turn off my oven and open the door and let the cheesecake finish cooling in the oven. Another thing that you can do to help prevent cracks is about 15 minutes after the cheesecake is finished baking, you can take a butter knife and just run it between the edge of the pan and the crust to loosen that cheesecake crust from the pan. If the crust is stuck to the pan any, while your cheesecake naturally shrinks as it cools, that crust will stay stuck and it actually encourages cracks to form. Once your cheesecake has cooled completely to room temperature, you are going to need to chill it for at least 6 hours or preferably overnight before you can actually dig in. I always just leave mine in the springform pan until I'm ready to serve it. This cheesecake has been chilling overnight, so let's take a look. This is a really rich and decadent cheesecake, so sometimes I like to lighten things up a little bit by adding some homemade whipped cream on top. I will leave the link to that recipe in the description so you can try that if you'd like, but today we're just doing all chocolate. It's so beautiful and crack-free, it's almost a shame to cut into it. And that is how you take the best dessert recipe and make it even better. If you guys enjoyed today's chocolate cheesecake, make sure to check out my classic version. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. This really is the best.